Hi, Jim. How are you?
Hi, George. Good.
Long time no see.
Glad to be with you again, even though it's as close as we can get here with what's going on.
You bet, you bet, you bet. The internet really is a magic and it's connecting our world. I mean, what time is over there in Atlanta right now?
It is 8:10 a.m.
8:10 is in morning, right? It's 8:10 here in the evening. So
Oh,
anyway, so I'm so glad that to have you on, and it's our honor on behalf of all the viewers on the other side of the world, at least. And then, so we know that as a learning development professional, uh, maybe more than 20 years ago, when I started with training and development and all of that. So when I learned ADDIE model and ISD, all of that, and then the evaluation part, that where you cannot escape and you must do it, the traditional classic, the one and only ADDIE model, and that E was evaluation. And for all these decades, and evaluation is so important to all of the learning development professionals. So as the inventor, I mean, the family, you're from the family. So can you tell us what the Kirkpatrick's 4 level of training evaluation? I guess a lot of people know that, but we just want to hear from you the one and only version. Can you tell us? Thank you.
okay. You consider me a reliable source, then, I think,
Oh, I do.
I'll
You
be
are the
glad
only
to.
one. One and only.
We are. That's true. That's true. Well, we start with level one reaction,
Mhm.
and that is making sure not just that the students are happy and satisfied, but the instruction helps to engage them and helps them to find relevance in what it is that they're going to be learning. So it's setting the table, adult learning theory, and all that. And the point of that is so they actually do learn, which is level two learning. And that means the knowledge, skills, attitude, the confidence, the commitment to do their job. That's level two. And then we get to the most difficult and important level is Kirkpatrick level three, which is behavior. It is actually getting people to apply what they learned. That's difficult because whether we're in China or the US or Venezuela or whatever, we are up against human nature, which we're not very many of us prone to say, I learned something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to discipline myself. No, we kind of like to do what's familiar and comfortable. So we really need that level three on the job performance in order to get to Kirkpatrick level four, which are results. So we have reaction, learning, and then we talk about crossing the bridge from the learning world, the training world, to the world of work, the world of business. And that is the important bridge that needs to be crossed in order to get people to apply it in order to see the results. And that's how my father taught it back in the 1950s and 60s. And George, you're right, for decades, so we've made a few changes to that, but that is the foundation of the 4 levels.
Great, thank you, sir. What is the 4 levels are very classic. I mean, is kind of you must learn it if you are a learning development professional, and you must do it at work at jobs. And I remember many years ago when I attended one of your dad's session, down session, my hats off, and he's a very humorous person. He was very with like 600 to 800 audiences at one of those ATD sessions, and then he was doing interaction. He said, "I will bring up a very modern technology called transparency." So he pronounced the transparency, and he started to write on the transparencies with a marked pen, and he asked the audience, you all know, so what is level one? Reaction. Level two, learning. Level three, application. He said, yes, no, you're wrong. I never said application. I said is behavior. And then level four, results. So this is an anecdote that I remember. I was there, and that was many years ago. But why that level 3 behavior rather than application? Can you explain a little bit that?
Uh, yeah, he honestly, in 1954, didn't give it much thought. He was a very practical person, a very common sense person, and
Right.
he came up, the word behavior just kind of popped into his head. He thought, well, we want them to behave differently. And since then, others do call it application. And to be honest with you, I find myself talking at on-the-job application, critical behaviors. I kind of flop back and forth, on that. I don't really get hung up on the word, but I think if people think of applying what they learn on the job, that I think is a better term, to be honest with you, because it connects what they learned level 2,
Mm-hmm.
applying it on the job, and behavior is just can be separate from learning. And so I think the main point is that the application, the behavior, the performance, we use the word a lot, the performance actually is the key, and the learning is necessary to prepare people for that. So uh, it's interesting that he called it that. He never wavered, I can tell you that, from that. In fact, I remember at an ASTD conference when I was showing the New World model for the first time. And he was, and the room was packed. They wanted to hear about the New World model. So I spent the first 5 minutes on level 1 and the second 5 minutes on level 2, and I couldn't wait to jump into level 3. And I started talking about it. And all of a sudden, an elderly man in the back of the room, standing up, standing room only, he pointed at me and said, "Kirkpatrick, I'm disappointed in you. You are being disrespectful to the 4 levels." Said, we cannot get to level 3 without level 1 and 2. And the whole room was stunned and nobody said anything. And you know what I said? "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to offend you." So I'm always careful to make sure that level 1 and level 2 are building blocks, but they're not sufficient to get to the behavior. So he was a funny man with me too. And one other thing, George, one time I was using, instead of his overhead projector, which he always wanted me to use, I was using PowerPoint. And he'd always say, "Oh, be careful." And right in the middle of my presentation, the PowerPoint froze. And he stood up and said, "I told you you should be using the transparency." So he was a funny man. But you're right.
Mm-hmm.
People have been using the 4 levels for decades. And
Right.
we figured it was time for trying to make it more powerful.
You bet. Later on, we'll come back to the New World model. But as we mentioned, your dad, that somewhere I did my own study, and then I learned that the model first first appeared in 1959 when he did his dissertation at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for his PhD, but. What's your version? I mean, tell us what's the truth birth of 4 levels, and where and how, and what's the occasion? One night he was just cooking or just pop out or something. How? What's the occasion?
Well, you're right about everything. The dates might be a little different, but he was working on his dissertation at the University of Wisconsin in the U.S. It was a supervisory course that he was teaching, and he decided, well, if I'm teaching it, I might as well evaluate it. And this was 1954. So he said, well, I'm going to see if people are satisfied with it. I'll call that reaction. I'll make sure they learn something. He didn't call it a level or anything. He just said, I'll make sure they learn something, and I hope they do something with it. So that was 1954. He didn't mention anything about results during his dissertation. I've been through it a number of times. And then in 1959, he got a call from ASTD. I think it had a different name, American Society of Training Directors or something.
Training directors at that time.
Write an article.
Yep.
He said, well, I'll write 4 articles. They said, we've never done that before. He said, well, now's the time. So in 1959, the first one was level 1 reaction. Second one was level 2 learning. And then into the beginning of 1960, he wrote the other 2 that were behavior and results. So that's really what happened. And then what happened, George, is he went back to his teaching. And to be honest, he was an expert in supervision. in coaching, mentoring, those kind of things. And it was about at least 10 years later that he was working with Motorola. And they said, "Oh, Dr. Kirkpatrick, we're using your model all over the world." He said, "What model is that?" They said, "Why, it's the 4 levels." He said, "What's the 4 levels?" And he
So
had
he didn't
never
know it.
followed the
So
model.
he didn't know it until somebody else told him that it
He
became
forgot about
official.
it. It was maybe 15 years. It was a
Wow.
long time. He never called it the 4 levels. He never called it a model. But then he's no fool. He said, "Well, if the world is calling it the Kirkpatrick model, I might as well go with that." And then he devoted his time with that. So that's how it happened.
Great story, great story. And ever since it just came into official existence. So, and last year, when I taught ISD, instructional design courses here in China and some other countries, I always at the very last one at the E level, and I always tell everybody this year, that was last year. This year is the 60 years of birthday celebration of the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of a evaluation model. But that was actually last year, and in China, 60 is a big number in China because the 5 cycles and something like that. So, anyhow, that's a great story to hear, Jim. So right after that, we have been learning and seeing and using and applying the Kirkpatrick models all the way through, and then what about the New World model? Can you tell us what's the difference from your dad's? And you came up with a New World model, right? And then what was the reason, what the background, why, and how? Can you describe the New World model for us as well?
Well, I didn't really pay much attention to his model even into my 40s. I had other jobs, other career paths, and I ended up going to a luncheon that he was teaching. And the first time, it was in 1995, and I went to, and I had at that point become a director of training for a bank, and I started listening to him. He was a visiting professor. He came down to our city, and it made sense to me, and I started to review it. But I realized quickly that while learning was expanding, into blended learning using a variety of sources, the 4 levels was sitting absolutely stagnant for 50 years. And what was happening is people operationalized it in a way that was not as effective as what the New World is. They started with level 1 because the article started with level 1. And what we had was level 1 smile sheets, level 2 knowledge testing, and then a level 3 90-day survey. And honestly, George, to this day, that is still the most prevalent belief of what the 4 levels is. And there's several problems with that. One, it doesn't start where it needs to start, and that's with level 4 results, and re-engineer it backwards. And 2, if you're trying to get people to actually apply what they learned, if you wait 90 days and hope that somehow they have applied it, and all you're doing is asking them in a survey, are you applying it? You're not doing anything to inspire the application, nothing to inspire the behavior, and people are probably not going to be very truthful with you anyway on a survey. So we realized that this thing was stuck in the Stone Age. The model the cement was dry, and nobody was changing it. And then what people started doing is saying, well, we need to show results. So they kept going with the traditional model, and then all they did was to paste results onto their dashboards and scorecards and say, oh, now we're connected to the business. Well, they weren't connected at all other than on a dashboard. So we realized that level 3 was the missing link. And a 90-day survey was doing little to do anything about application. So we realized we had to turn the whole model upside down. In fact, Bob Pike, when you said Bob before, was that who it was?
Yeah, Bob Pike.
Well, he wrote an article in the 1980s that was titled Turning Kirkpatrick on His Head. My dad was furious with him, and I had to explain to him, I said, no, Bob is on the right track. We need to start with the results and then realize what kind of performance is required and then reverse engineer back to the learning. But I saw Bob the other day. My dad never did forgive him for writing that, but I kept telling him, Dad, Bob had it right. And that's what the new world is. But it's about reverse engineering. And George, here is a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just watching to see if people are engaged and watching to see if they're learning and watching and hoping to see if they apply it and watching for results, the new world model is about influence.
Mm-hmm.
And it means we are trying to influence that they are comfortable, that they are engaged, that they are learning, and try and influence behavior rather than just watch it. So instead of relying on a 90-day survey, the new world focuses on the 89 days before that to do what we can and partner with people in the business to try and maximize performance rather than just hope that it happens. And we know that if people apply it, the easy level is level 4. The results are merely outcome from the hard work at level 3. And that is why we figured out we need to turn this whole thing upside down.
So so the difference is really you use the magnifier. You magnified level 3 instead of in the past was or it's probably not a good metaphor or analogy, but sitting on our hands to watch and wait or 90 days or 80-day result. But you really go into there and to monitor, to help or review, to support those to make sure those behaviors or applications happen on the job.
And George, you said it exactly right, because what is happening with COVID-19 is a blueprint for what should happen to everything. What they're doing is they are focusing on the behaviors. They're not educating us a lot, but they're focusing on the hand washing, the mask, the social distancing over and over and over, accountability, reminders over and over, in order to watch the leading indicators, which we're all watching. You guys have been watching longer than we have, watching for fewer deaths, fewer hospitalizations, all that things. So it is absolutely a beautiful blueprint of the critical behaviors at level 3, leading to the early signs of progress at level 4, and monitoring and adjusting along the way. It's a beautiful example of what we consider the new world model, what's happening in our world today.
That really has some real-time, real world applications nowadays. It's ongoing,
Yep, and our people are saying, follow the science and follow the data.
Exactly.
And before, we were following surveys, which weren't telling us much. We want real data. And the science means purposeful and deliberately going about it. And the data means, what are the key metrics that we need to observe to be able to tell whether what we're doing is working or not?
Exactly.
So you're right. It's a beautiful example of what we call a new world.
I see. So why, well, a couple smaller questions. Have you seen that, and for how long? Well, that brings to my makeup question. That is, you mentioned not until the 40s. Your early 40s, did you started to pay attention to the 4 levels? What was your major, and what was your career before that? I know you got your doctorate.
I was a teacher, for quite a while, for years, high school and college. And to be honest, my dad talked about the 4 levels so much, I just didn't want to hear it. The son, the prodigal son here was going his own way. So that was primarily what I was doing. I was a psychologist for a number of years, and but mostly teaching, kind of following him with education. And then I somehow talked myself into being a training director in 1995, and then the rest is where I am now.
Great. It turned out to be just the way it should be. Somehow, it's even though we gone some winding roads, and I read I read some of the the business world and some of the family traditions and the, their sons and grandsons and their offspring. They did not start with what their upper generation started at the very beginning, but later on in the 30s and 40s, and then they came back and the family business and just carried on. There were so many examples of that, very successful. I think it is the same.
And you're right, it happened exactly as it should. In fact, one thing, things go full circle. I remember my dad was close to the end of his life. He was probably 89 years old. He died when he was 90. And I was visiting him. And I said, Dad, I've got an interesting piece of something I'd like to read to you. And she said, oh, okay. So I was reading it out of a book kind of thing. I wouldn't let him see it. I'm saying, here's what somebody said. It said, training managers would be smart to evaluate the effectiveness of their training before the day of reckoning arrives. I said, Dad, what do you think of that? He said, wow, that's pretty good. I said, have you ever heard that before? He said, no, I don't think I remember hearing that. I said, well, I'm reading it out of a journal article. He said, it's still not familiar to me. I can say the journal article was written in 1959 by you. He had the foresight to talk about the day of reckoning in 1959. And he said, did I write that? I said, you sure did. Oh, he was so happy about that. But it's still true. The day of reckoning is arriving for a lot of people who are following the traditional way that are not seeing performance improvement. And they're, at least in the US and a lot of other countries we work in, their jobs are in jeopardy and they are losing their funding because the business side does not see the connection of what they're doing. And the day of reckoning has arrived.
Right.
And those who need to, there are things that people can do. And I know you and I will talk about that to stand tall on the day of reckoning.
You bet. It all meant to be. I was thinking you were just making it up while reading something to him, back to him. You were just making it up. Actually, it was not.
He kept trying to see what I was reading. I wouldn't let him see it because it was the actual journal, and he might have recognized it.
That's something. That's a really good
story.
That's a great story. So the other lesson to all of us is to be careful or remember what you have written.
It may come back. That's right.
Yeah. So the other question is, so your dad has seen the New World Model for how many years? I mean, before he passed away. I mean, when did you come up with the New World Model? What year?
2007, I would say, is the year.
So he has seen it a couple years.
And I had thought about it a lot, but to be honest with you, George, I'm a thinker and a doer, and the spirit and the heart of the model. I'm not much of a businessman at all, and either was he. He was a professor. He never started Kirkpatrick business. I never started the Kirkpatrick business. I was a consultant by that time, and then teamed up with Wendy in 2008, the business mind, and that's when we really solidified the New World Model. And she was very good about including him in that and explaining things, so that he was a part of it. But sometimes he'd say to me, Jim, you guys talk about leading indicators, right? I said, yes. You talk about accountability and support, right? Yes. You talk about required drivers. I said, all the time. He said, I don't really understand all those things, but you keep doing it, and I'm with you.
Great.
So he understood the basics of it and was always promoting the basics, but he would always tell audiences, he said, Jim and Wendy have taken this beyond what I could have possibly imagined.
Right.
And the way that the New World Model became implemented is through early adopters. And you probably know it was a change management issue because still today, there's a whole lot of people, a majority of people that say it's smile sheets, pre and post test, and 90-day surveys. And our biggest challenger out there are those who say we've been using the Kirkpatrick model for decades because I always know they're old school, they're traditional, and it's going to be hard to convert them to the new world.
Right. A lot of people. That's another question that I will come up with later when I ask you. I'm going to ask you about level 3, the application rate.
Good.
Yeah. So the other curiosity is from my part is why do you call it New World Model? I mean, what's the word stand for by New World? What do you mean when you named it?
Well, I'm the right person to ask because I was the one that named it.
Right.
Uh, I see metaphors everywhere. I see that outside my window here, there's a lake and the sun is shining on it. I see metaphors everywhere, rainbows and sunset, all those kind of things. And I guess it was just more in a kind of a vision to me that the new world was something to bring hope, to
Got it.
people, to inspire people that they could rise higher than they were with a traditional approach to evaluation. And they were already rising higher with a new world of learning, with all the different ways of getting people to learn. And I just somehow, one morning I saw the sun rising, and I just saw today's a new day, and I can do what I want to with it. And this new world, I had a vision that it would really be a new world for a lot of functions, a lot of organizations, and that's honestly how I came about it. It was an early morning sunrise, to be honest with you.
Do you consider the New World model is an upgrade version of the old school? What do we call it? The old school. Is it an
Yes,
upgrade
it
version?
is. We certainly have not changed the four
Mm-hmm.
levels. They are timeless, and they will remain timeless as far as I can envision. But it was more about operationalizing it, because when people read those articles written 1, 2, 3, 4, that's how they operationalized it. We're thankful what they did, but the one thing my dad said shortly before he died, he said, Jim, I have one regret, that I wrote those articles 1, 2, 3, 4. I wish I'd written them 4, 3, 2, 1. I never thought of it. And he said, anything you can do to remind people to start with level 4, he said, I would appreciate that. So
That's
it's also a very practical model.
you
People
bet.
ask me how much research do I do, and do
Right.
we? I said, well, there's a lot of university PhD students that are doing a lot. We more research best practices, so
Right.
it's absolutely a practitioner's model rather than a scholarly model. Because I'm a kind of a practical kind of person. My dad was extremely practical, so that's why the model is a practical one.
The same here. I concur. I concur totally with you
Do you?
that I mean, our improvement consultant, my partner and I. You haven't met my partner yet, but he and I, we met 11 years ago. Ever since we met, and then we came up with the GPSIE model. It's a measurement model, and then we ever since, because I always found it that it's very hard to convince the business what our training's values are. So we went up to research on management. The research by research is not like we're exactly like saying we're not doing research by like in university academia world, but
Right.
by doing projects and consulting projects and paid projects. We're high or low, we don't care. We just want to get to the bottom of it. So we came up with the management. We went up to the management level, try to solve this problem. And we're on the same track. But I think I think what Don said was very correct. That we should always start with the end in mind. Start with the end in mind, and then 4, 3, 2, 1. I think he's correct, and he's reminding us that we should always do that. I think that's what part of his legacy. He left us.
And you're right. And people start doing that. What they do is they go to their senior leader, their mission statement or vision statement, and they identify, oh, that's the end in mind.
Right.
And then what they do is they reverse engineer, and they say, we're gonna do our surveys, and then we're gonna do our testing at 2, and then we're gonna do our smile sheet at 1. They re-engineer it in a way, but it still doesn't change the other ingredient, and that means trying to influence the levels, right, not just try and measure them along the way. Look what's happening with COVID-19. They're not just trying to measure what's going on. They're trying to say, what can we learn from that, and what can we modify as far as how soon do we open things up, what kind of testing do we need, what kind of vaccines and all those stuff, using the information that you get to make decisions rather than just collecting it and storing it and spitting out some kind of a dashboard or something.
Exactly. A real world application. How do we react? How do we react and respond? Exactly. And
exactly.
to the go down to the road, as we should be. So thank you. That really answered my question, because when we studied Kirkpatrick model and your new world model, I thought, wow, this is great. Why don't we call it Kirkpatrick 2.0? 2.0 was so popular. Web 2.0 and this 2.0 was so popular, and people immediately understand, oh, that's the next generation, and you are the next generation. Did you ever thought about that? Actually, did you ever think about that?
Well, then I think about that 2.0, just like everything else in our technology world, becomes 3.0 and 4.0 and 4 gig and 5 gig and 6 gig. Pretty soon we're ancient with our 2.0, and someone else comes up with a 3.0, and then what do we do? But New World can just keep rolling along.
Rolling along. It's always new, right?
That's right. It's still a new world tomorrow. That's right.
So you waited from the conventional naming conventions to stay new. Okay, great. Thank you. That really answered the questions, because I collected some of the questions from our audiences who know Kirkpatrick model, and there are some questions they also wanted to ask, and it's all embedded on our conversation. So
George, I got to tell you that this is refreshing for me, because I haven't talked about a lot of this stuff for years. They've asked me different kind of questions in podcasts and so forth, but I'm talking about things that are just appearing from decades ago. So it's fun for me.
You bet. I'm so glad. It's a new perspective. It's a new,
right.
Or even it's not up to a dimension yet, but we'll get there. We'll try. Okay. It's fun to me too. Yeah. Just before I come to the next question is, I may leave to the last, but I just in case I forgot that the last time I saw Don and you and Wendy and the family was at the Orlando ATD conference in 2012. That was his retirement farewell session, right? He had 2 sessions, and you were there because of I remember the whole long table, or just down there, and you sitting next to him, and the room was packed with 400 or 500. I thought they couldn't get a bigger name, so they have to do it twice. And
I remember that it was very emotional.
It was
very emotional for us.
It was,
but it was fitting, because I wanted him to feel the respect.
Right.
And the honor and the love from the people that he had influenced. He had influenced them, and I just wanted to somehow set the stage that he would feel that. He got to have pictures taken. People lined up outside the door to have their picture taken with him.
Right.
And that was a very special time for me and him, and my mom was there too, and Wendy.
Oh, really? Yeah, she probably was sitting on the front row. I was on the, on your stage on the right hand, in the middle, to the side of the room. And besides me, all the aisles are packed with people. I think the Orlando Convention Center, they probably give them exception for the fire code or something like that, because they let so many people in there. And the people at the very end was very, was very emotional, because everybody was stood up, and it was standing ovations for 3 to 5 minutes for his contribution to the.
Let me tell you something that'll surprise you, George. I haven't told many people this.
You bet.
But my dad was not an expert in evaluation.
Mm.
He was an expert in coaching. He was an expert in performance review, supervision, managing change, those kind of things. He wrote books on those, and people really use those. Evaluation was just kind of a side thing for him that he happened to come up with on his for his dissertation, and he never thought of writing a book about that till later on. But honestly, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to him, he really wouldn't talk more than an hour about evaluation in any kind of setting, because he didn't know any more about it than that. But
really, that's a surprise. But anything we say is a respect to him. Yeah,
that was it. But he had a few things that he would share. But I'll tell you, the reason I believe that the model survived was not the scholarly aspect to it. It was Don's heart. and it was
Yes.
his spirit. And that is, they loved the painter of the painting.
You
And
bet.
that still stays with us. You saw how beloved he was that day,
He
and
was.
people wanted to see Don Kay. They weren't there to honor the model; they were there to honor the man. And to be honest, I'm a chip off the old block. Wendy is the business side, and she knows the model very deeply,
Yeah.
about the particulars. And I am still trying to spread the goodwill. I know a ton about it, and things that she wouldn't know, but his heart remains, and I think that is why it is the strongest model in the world, and will continue to be that, because, and that isn't just about fluff. The key to evaluation is building relationships. It's not just the technology, it's of the surveys and the technology and the testing. It is building relationships among the partners involved, the supervisors and the managers and the senior leaders and the program sponsors. And it's the heart of the human to human contact that inspires people to perform. Technology has a hard time inspiring and compelling people to apply what they learn, but the heart and the relationships remain the core of the model. The rest is the science of it. And we need both.
You bet. You bet. We need both science and being a member of the organization, both
Yes.
ways. It is both
Yes.
ways. Yeah, I never know that, but it really makes sense. I mean, in retrospect, all we have studied and heard about him and listened to his lectures, and it really makes sense that he's really a great coach. He's a really good coach. He's so patient and so, I mean, witty. I mean, that's probably the good word. It's very witty and humorous sometimes. It's just kick you off without even knowing it, but you got it. Something like that.
And George, I hope I don't embarrass you by that, but I can sense that you are that kind of person too. I'm sure the work that you do is very practical. It's based on application of what people are doing, but you are a connector. You are a person that inspires and brings out the best in people, because I believe that they think you have their best intentions. And I think you do.
Thank you, sir.
Because I think you are where you are at least as much from your heart as you are from your science.
Thank you, sir. My hat off. And that day, yes, where I'm trying. For me personally, I think that's great. I mean, thank you, thank you for the encouragement. But just in retrospect, that day I was there because of 2 sessions. I could have stayed for the second session, but I said, well, I probably give the seat to somebody else, because there's so many people packing at the door. They're trying to come in. So I did take the opportunity. I waited for the hallway and took a picture with you guys. And he was in wheelchair. So yeah. Anyway, my hats off and to Don and all of our hats off
to Don. That's fair enough. Good.
You bet. So continue to our conversation, Jim. What is so can you give us a few examples? We talk about a lot about the old school model and the new world model. Can you give us a few examples successfully implemented?
Well, I was glad to see that we were going to talk about that, because that is how the new world is growing, through successful case examples. And I'll give you a couple of, for instance, would be NASA. They are truly an ambassador for the New World model. When we asked them what the end in mind is, they said, well, we can never afford to have another Columbia or Challenger.
No.
And so they realized that back then they ignored data, they ignored advice, they were going to launch, regardless, and even, and so they're saying, we want to make sure now that we take an honest look at true data. We don't want to just pick the data and look at the information that will support our case. We're going to look at both things that are favorable and things that are unfavorable, in order to make the right decisions with our engineers, with our trainers, all those kind of things. So they have a number of programs that they have started with the end in mind, followed the data, followed the science, focused on performance, on the accountability and support of performance in order to continue to fulfill the mission of safe space travel and so forth. So there's certainly one. We have several elements of our government that follow that. We have healthcare is a big one here in the U.S. Several examples of organizations that realize that they're not just money making and they're not just trying to get more people in their hospitals, but it is about patient outcomes. That's what matters, patient outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so that's they need funding in order to continue. But patient outcomes is what we call the flag at the top of the mountain, and the focus is on performance. Right. And this is both federal healthcare and private healthcare, that they're really seeking all measures in order to focus on the behavior of the nurses and the techs and all those people in order to reduce infections in hospital, to reduce mistakes that are made, reduce poor relationships with patients and their families. And so they're steaming ahead well with that. It's going to be interesting to see now after COVID-19, who's going to be moving ahead and who isn't. Right. And what is going to be happening now is I don't think there's going to be a lot of funding for training as much, but people that can help build performance. Performance has to be what the senior leaders are looking for. And I can think of other organizations, banks, finance. We look at Apple computers. They now have their own internal Kirkpatrick facilitators, that instead of me going in or one of our certified facilitators going in, they have internal Kirkpatrick facilitators, and they are working hard on, again, performance, and then studying the leading indicators, the signs of progress, monitoring, and making adjustments along the way in order to maximize the impact, maximize the results. So those would be some examples of those who are leading the charge and are more than glad to talk to others as ambassadors to say, we are following the New World model and we're seeing results that we weren't getting when we thought we were following it before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so NASA, healthcare, and Apple, some big name companies. And have you done projects like in any other countries, and developed countries or developing countries?
Yes, we have 15 different affiliates around the world that represent different countries or different areas. I would say the strongest progress we see in England, the UK is one. France, we have Jonathan in France, and he's doing a good job. Mm-hmm. New Zealand and Australia, some in Brazil, but the key in all those instances are finding those open-minded, mission-minded senior leaders that are willing to try a new process, not of evaluation, but of learning and performance. And if they're willing to connect learning to performance, then they do some pilot programs. Those are successful. Word gets out, it's promoted, and then other organizations within that country, start to pick up on it. So I'm always, I was in China, went through a lot of different cities, maybe 9 years ago. I think I did 5 cities in 5 days, kind of.
Goodness. That's a lot of trouble.
I know it.
That's a hectic travel schedule.
One of the cities you're in right now, you're not just surprised. But it was all about trying to launch a belief that inspire people to be I say it's sitting there waiting for you. The old model is alive and well in China as it is in the rest of the world. There is a new world there. And you guys in this organization or in this company or whatever, you can be the first to lead the way and light the way for others. That was my whole purpose. I wasn't really trying to generate business other than just trying to generate, somebody like I did in 1997, the light goes on, and I say, I'm going to try against all odds and against resistance,
Right.
to try and light the way for better performance and better results.
So it is really the old school Kirkpatrick model is really for the application part is, I mean, so far through, I mean, 40 minutes into our conversation, what I see is that the application and result of level 3 and level 4 are very key among the 4 levels. I mean, it's like children. If you have children, which one do you love the most? I love them all. They're all my fingers, right? But which
That,
one would you say are the most? If you have 1 or 2, what's your pick?
well, I like that you bring up about raising children. You don't just go to a class in how to raise children, and then they naturally grow up to be responsible citizens.
Right,
You've got to be watching and guiding them along the way, and not just trying to educate them, but to guide them in the way they behave to each other, in the
right.
way they behave to other. Are they responsible with their chores? Are they kind to each other? And it's a constant challenge against human nature when the kids might want to go wander into the streets of Shanghai when they're 7 years old. No, you can't do that. And so
Right.
you're trying to guide them over and over again so that eventually it becomes their way of being kind, of being responsible citizens, of being successful in their careers, kind of thing. But it's a challenge.
It is.
Uh, it isn't just about educating you as the parents. It's about you guiding them along the way to follow the proper way of being a child and being a young adult. And it's the same thing. It's an ongoing, rather than the old school traditional Kirkpatrick model is a series of events. There's a smile sheet
Right.
at the end of training. There's a test at the end of training. And then there's a 90-day survey. Evaluation needs to be more continuous, particularly in the field, monitoring and adjusting in order to follow the data and seeing if indeed we are seeing improvements both internally and externally. And
So it is
so
really, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, currently, as the different organizations and associations study, 85% of resources are spent in levels 1 and level 2, both in the training and in the evaluation. And we've got to flip that and figure out how to give them what they need when they need it and focus on level 3 and the leading indicators of level 4, rather than just continuing to spend so many resources delivering training that's falling into the black hole and nothing is coming from it.
Exactly. That's the last thing you want to do as a learning and development professional, because it's a global phenomenon, almost a global phenomenon, that we see learning functions, their position or their value are not, I mean, hardly recognized by the business. The typical question is, okay, my sales increased to 60%. What's your value? What's your account in that? What's how much? And we cannot count that. So that's the typical, most classic question we've been asking for years, and they've been making us perplexed on what's the value of training. Everybody knows by default, you don't have to prove it. It's creating value, but how much? And the model really help us, And there are the question is a branch question, but I also want to ask you about, because there are also other evaluation models. This is not only Kirkpatrick model. There are like 15 or 13, 14 of them. And there are like, the Navy's model. There are like Rob Brinkoff's, success case method. And there are any like Jack Phillips and, ROI. And for somehow, a lot of people in China still call ROI the 5th level. I mean, that's another branch question. That's a tweak question. So can you tell us all about that, or the official one? Is there anyhow at all a level 5? And what's the difference between the Kirkpatrick with others? Why they stand out, accepted worldwide?
Let me give you another little story here.
You bet.
Probably 20 years ago, one of my first ASTD conferences, sitting on the stage were Rob Brinkerhoff, Jack Phillips, and Don Kirkpatrick. And they were having a debate.
All three of them. I mentioned them all.
Oh, they're all there. The room was packed,
You
and
bet.
they're all talking about different things. And Jack's sitting next to my dad, and he's the one. He would acknowledge that he got his first 4 levels from us and all that. Now he's come up with this big. So someone asked my dad, way from the back of the room with a microphone, Dr. Kirkpatrick, what do you think of level 5? And sitting right next to Jack, he said, there is no such thing as level 5. And Jack started giggling, and my dad was just straight-faced, and pretty soon went over and tapped him on the shoulder and stuff. But let me tell you, and this is important, I'm not just going to tell a story here.
You bet.
You said before about sales training. Jack, the ROI level 5 would be trying to isolate the impact of the training, the sales class in training. Okay, the ROI is how much money did that class cost versus how much increase in sales did we get due to that class? Well, there's a whole lot of research out there, 70-20-10 model, that says the class itself is only going to give you about 10% of what people actually apply. So the problem with that isolation, from my point of view, is that the supervisors that are helping, it is the peers, the communities of practice, it is the mentoring, the touch bases, all those things that happen after the class. With level 5, you need to factor all those out of the equation. And how do you factor out the students' motivation when they get back to the job? What if they say, I'm going to be inspired to do this? How do you identify that and factor it out? So first of all, it's impossible to do that, is from our point of view. In fact, Rob Brinkerhoff said it's like trying to evaluate the value of the B key on your laptop. How much did that B key add to your overall typing? And what it does is discredits those who you need on the other side of the bridge in order to be successful. And it's almost like, this is what our class did versus, and what you said about the sales training. This is how I'm going to tie it together. We don't want people just to deliver sales training because they are going to be in jeopardy, at least in the United States, because they're not delivering much value ultimately, and they're disconnected from the business. What we want them to do, and for your people to do, is reinvent themselves. And rather than say, there's a whole lot of other factors that go into the performance, we know that, they're external factors. Excuse me. What we want those to be are internal factors where the learning and development people now take part of, where they are helping to develop. I'm getting all choked up about this, you can tell.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
In helping build communities of practice and help desks and mentoring programs and supervisor touch bases and all the things that happen after the training, so they are actually seen as having a variety of different ways of contributing as strategic business partners rather than just training providers with the cost center on them. So that is, and there, what we do in the Kirkpatrick model, New World, is we determine the relative contribution of each of those major factors to the sales numbers rather than just try and isolate our own training factor. So we want, and we don't isolate. We want to look at the relative contribution of how much did the community of practice help? How much did the weekly touch bases help? How much did the rewards and the recognition and all that help? Because we all know, all of us know, it takes many different facets working together to maximize performance and results. So why would we want to isolate one and throw the rest away? We
Got
don't.
it. Yeah.
And we don't mind that he calls it a 5th level. It's the isolation part that goes against our whole philosophy of partnerships rather than separation.
Right. It's all unalienable, and it's all like a synergistic, what they call the synergistic collection of efforts that you cannot alienate or separate, isolate, or any single factor out of the whole entire system and say, you know, what like, just like Rob said, like, how do you value that key, you know, that key, V key to the entire board?
Or George, for you, how much did that class you took 18 years ago on parenting, how much did that contribute to the success of your children now that they're grown? Well, first of all, how could you possibly do that? And second of all, it wouldn't be very much, would it? You know, you might remember a couple little tips that helped you along the way, but it just,
right.
you know, I don't know. It just,
It's all cumulative. I mean, cumulative. It's all
right.
piled up in cumulative amounts,
It
right?
is.
Yeah, it's all year after year. By the way, my I got a 5-year-old and I got a 7-month-old.
Oh, so good. I
Yeah,
kind of, good.
they're all asleep now. That's why we can talk. Well,
And
I
you know what
hope.
I mean by, with your 5-year-old, you know what monitor and adjust means, don't you? You know, is he a good big brother, big sister to the
Oh
other? And
yeah. You bet.
fingers on the pulse, you know, continuously.
Yeah. And I always say that, and somehow when I said it every time, I said it was a big brother, and you should be watchful. I mean, you should take care of your little sister. And I try not to say that too much because I feel someday he will kind of his character will come up say, why should I do that? You know, that the younger brother and I mean elder brother always say that.
But
Sometimes
see,
you get a kickback.
you're monitoring, adjusting your behavior.
Yeah.
Because if you overdo any one thing, because we call the drivers of behaviors required drivers. Those are the, you know, rewards and recognition and encouragement and
Right.
monitoring, those kind of things. You don't want to be too heavy on the monitoring of where you're the heavy dad all the time, and your son could grow up resenting you and knowing the only time he's going to hear from you is when you're correcting him. You know, you want to have a balance, a prudent balance of those times when you say you can't pull that toy away from your you know,
Right.
sister, but you've got to balance, you know, the love with the discipline, and it's an
Right.
art.
Right.
Each family is different, each organization is different. Of how do you do that with your children, with the workers and your employees.
Exactly. As a manager or as a lead, even as a leader, is all the matter, the art of balancing all the factors. I mean, and yeah, it's like, you know, the water in the barrel, and then you have so many balls. Have to push this down, and then that pop up, and you put this down, that one pop up. You got so many balls, you have to keep them balanced.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Great,
And
great.
that's
Thank you.
why level 3 is not very popular. People want the quick, easy method, which a lot of people think ROI is. You just figure out how much money did we save, did we spend on the training, how much did we get? Great. We now we just have to do the math and
Hmm.
see. That would be nice if it worked, but but uh, but it doesn't. Level 3 is hard work.
Right.
Parenting is hard work.
It is. It
Uh,
is. It is.
and
It's
a
all
lot of
about
people
feedback and support.
a lot of people are wanting the quick and easy answer, and we say that's why level 3 is the hardest, because it's hard work, and also it brings up unfavorable data sometimes, and sometimes senior leaders are saying you're making me look bad, and so we call it a minefield where it's treacherous, because we believe that evaluation has to be about the truth, uncovering
Right.
what's working and what isn't, for the sole purpose of making improvements, not to make somebody look bad. But there's a lot of senior leaders that want to shy away from that and say, you just do your training and we expect the results to come from that.
Right.
And
Right.
I wish it
Right.
was true, but it isn't.
Right. When I was about 10 years ago, when I was in charge of the IBM training for in China, for the global delivery section. It's a huge, you know, we got like an
Oh,
army
wow.
of 25,000 engineers in China. They need to be trained. They're in multiple cities, and I was, you know, in charge of all of that effort. And every month I write up a monthly scorecard, you know, is from the learning and development, from, we'll call it L&K, learning knowledge section, the function.
Yeah.
So I'm the functional leader, and within that report, first slide, numbers. Tell me all the numbers, nothing but numbers, and then all the backups. And then on the third slide is level 3 evaluation. Believe it or not, it's level 3 evaluation, because level 1, level 2 is all there, nice and beautifully done. There no problem,
Wonderful.
95%, and, you know, satisfaction ratio, and you know, 100%, pass ratio, something like that.
Yeah.
And then level 3, it fluctuates, and then our leader my CEO was like, he was really reading the Gantt chart. I mean, he's reading the lines and he's building up his story. And why that application is down? Oh, that part that maybe the SAP training. Oh, we got a few SAP training. I mean, we got a few more projects coming up and something like that. He's puzzling. He's putting all the puzzles together. You see what I'm saying? He's building his own story. He's puzzling up the whole entire picture. And the level 3 is so important to him because that's a very important indicator in how his business is running and should be running in the next quarter, a month.
And George, what's happening is, and this is the majority of people, are providing level 1 and level 2 numbers only, and they're wondering why the senior leaders don't get excited about it. Because they're trying to say, take a look at our numbers that are important to us, but the senior leaders are saying, but those are not credible. Those are not meaningful to me. Yeah, right. You do your training, but show us numbers that are meaningful. But then we whine and complain, why don't the senior leaders buy in with us? Right. It's because we're asking them to embrace our numbers and our language rather than seeking to understand their numbers and their language.
Exactly. I always teach during my consulting projects. There are management consulting projects, and some of them are learning, instructional design courses. But I always tell them to first bear the end in mind, start from the end, and also when I teach the learning development of professionals, I say always try to think as a CEO, and I provide them the models and the ways and how to the tools how to do it from the very beginning. Because if you don't think as a CEO, and you never can become a CEO. It's just like, I know the old saying, a soldier who doesn't want to be a general and never be a general, something like that.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that, and not at all surprised, George.
Oh, you're not alone. I mean, you got a lot of confidants, believers here over on the other side of the globe, for sure. We were talking a little bit about children and the legacy. So it's going on. Just on the side, I think it also leads to the next question. Like over the past over 60 years or even 65 years, and the old school model. I mean, the Kirkpatrick model has been there. It has impacted so many generations. I guess people started with Kirkpatrick model and they retired, with the model, because the career span of 30 years, something on average. So over 60 years, you have impacted so many generations, and now it's 2020. So it's the first year of the next decade. So what do you think the Kirkpatrick model will impact the next decade? And also kind of a piggyback, and another question is there any, do you have any planning for the third generation, how the legacy goes on? Because that's everybody's asking, and because you're already considered a master and legend yourself, but as the new world coming, in your terms, what's going to happen? Tell us.
Well, I hope that my 30-year-old son, CJ, is going to pick up the torch from me. I'm 67. I still got a lot left in the tank here, but there's a chance that we may be working.
I totally believe that. You're just on the go all the time.
Yeah, but I believe that I have as good a vision of the future as anybody, because I talk to a lot of people about the journeys that are on and what's working and what isn't.
Right.
I think this whole pandemic is going to be an opportunity. It's going to be a mountaintop experience for the whole world to determine how are we going to carry on from here. Right. And I see two crystal balls. I think it pretty clearly that one crystal ball is those who merely are going to convert classroom training to virtual training. They may think that's the answer and use Zoom. I think they're going to be replaced by apps and avatars and YouTube, different kinds of things like that, because they haven't built the bridges, starting with level 4, executive bridges, working relationships, and the people in the supervisors and managers. And I think a lot of people will think that they're going to be okay, but they're not, because they won't be able to demonstrate that they have provided a significant contribution to performance and results. Those that will thrive will be those that truly embrace this approach. And George, I'm not here to say ours is the only approach, but this new world way of doing things, which will focus on building relationships with the tactical relationships with supervisors and managers, and the strategic relationships with the program sponsors, senior executives, and use them as working partners along the way, focusing on performance, monitoring and adjusting, making sure they're trying to inspire and compel performance, monitoring the progress and making adjustments. Those are going to be the ones that are left standing and left standing tall, because they can demonstrate their contribution as learning and performance partners, not as just learning cost center professionals. And I think that this is going to be the blast that is going to see which path are people going to take. And I think there's pretty much 2 separate paths. Either you're going to continue to provide learning, or you are going to be a learning and performance strategic business partner. And I hope my son is there to help lead the way with that.
CJ, right?
Right.
We would like to hear from him someday at ATD sessions, and bring him on.
He gets this stuff. In fact, he's doing a lot of work that I never got to do in the business. He works for a company that delivers food to people online. So they're exploding their business because people, the restaurants are all closed. And he really already understands this. He's Kirkpatrick certified. He understands about building relationships and all that. And he's a lot like me. So I kind of think he's going to come the same path that I did.
I'm going to say that probably it's a couple of years, and maybe very quickly, or which we hope like sooner rather than later. And then someday he will wake up and say, Dad, I wanted to be in your business too. Can I be a partner of yours? And then just like what you did in your early 40s, and then you joined your dad's and then carry the torch. I mean, the torch is being carried on.
Yeah, better late than never, right?
You bet.
I wasn't there until I was mid-40s, so no hurry.
What age was Don at that time when you just decided to start age? I mean, you're 67 now.
He was about 70, early 70s.
Early 70s, okay.
Yeah, early 70s.
So there's enough time, I mean, for him we would just cross our fingers. He will wake up and make his decision and join the legacy. I mean, he's already been there on his way, probably.
And you know what? I do hope he does, and I think he will. But there are so many people like you, George, that are out there around the world that are really new world kind of leaders. And the legacy will go on. And Don's spirit, my spirit will go on. We may not call it Kirkpatrick Partners anymore. I don't really know about that kind of stuff. But I know that the new world model will carry on, because we've got enough critical mass of people like you that have the understanding and the heart to keep it thriving.
You bet. It's been tested for over 6 years. It's very credible. Second, I know we're a little bit overrun a little time. You just checking you're okay, right?
I'm good.
You bet. The next question I really want to ask you is, what are your advices to the learning and development professionals, especially in the developing countries, not only limited to China, but all as a whole, developing countries, when they use the model?
All right. Well, I'll tell you a little story here, and this is what my advice is. I was, again, at ASTD conference, And there were sessions going on. I had just given mine. So I thought I'd go down to the bookstore and kind of look at the books. You know, they have the big bookstore. And as I walked in, there was hardly anybody there. Everyone was at sessions. There was a man sitting on a stool that was reading a book. And so I went up to him. I recognized him. I talked to him a little bit before. But I said, you mind if I pull up a stool just to have a little chat? He said, no, go ahead. So I pulled up a stool, and I think I signed a book for him, and he signed one for me. We talked a little bit, and then I said, I have a question I'd like to ask you, Doctor, that you've probably been asked before, but is it okay if I do? He said, sure, go ahead. I said, of your 7 habits for highly effective people, is there one habit that's more important than all the others? He said, no, they're all woven together. You know, they build on each other. They're all, you know, really important. I said, I know that. Yeah, I get that. But if you had to pick one that you believe our industry, our training, learning industry, whatever you want to call us, desperately needs to do more than any others, is there one? And he kind of looked around, and he kind of, little gleam in his eye, and he smiled. He said, yeah, there's one. So I said, okay, are you going to tell me which one it is?
Yeah, which one?
Seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. I said, why do you say that? He said, because we have so many millions of well-meaning people in our learning industry. They're overeager, and they're too quick to peddle their competency models and peddle their learning objectives and peddle their learning solutions and all those kind of things. What we desperately need to, and then we say, well, training is just going to be cut, that we know it's the first to go. He said, that's not a foregone conclusion. That is because we have not crossed the bridge to spend time with them, to learn from them, and to ask questions and resist the temptation to say, oh, we can do that, and we can do that, and we can do that. And I feel that the same way. And so I think to take the advice of Jim Kirkpatrick and Stephen Covey is to do whatever individuals can to have lunch with, to talk with people on the other side and ask them, how is your work? You know, what are your challenges like? And when they talk a little bit, resist the temptation to say, we got a training for that. Ask the second question and the third question to say, how does that impact your results? And how does that impact the morale of your people? And what do you wish was different? And then hopefully, if you've earned the right by listening and showing that you care, they'll say, you got anything that can help us? And you say, I think we do. So that's it, George. And then let the chips fall from there, and the opportunities will arise from there if they realize that you're there to help them with their performance rather than take their subject matter experts and help you with your training. We're all self-centered about that. So It should be first being patient enough to listen, ask questions, and it's what they say, whether they're supervisors, managers, senior leaders, is more important than what we say, because they're investing in the conversation and the relationship. And then from there, opportunities will show themselves. So that really is the one thing that I think will make all the difference. And George, to be honest, Wendy and I are doing more talks on that these days than we are on the science of the model.
You bet. That's bottom line. We're all human after all. I mean, just the human connection, even though we cannot see each other, and we can do the elbow bump or give each other a hug or something like that in person, but we're still connecting. And but we're social. I mean, we're social connection is the bottom line, and communication, engagement.
And people need to feel validated.
You bet.
There's a world that's so busy out there that if somebody takes the time to show that they care, chances are you're going to have instant credibility. And it's going to be more credibility than you get with popping off with, we got a new competency model we'd like to try on your people, kind of thing.
Yeah. It is exactly, just to elaborate a little bit about that what I found out is all about communication. Either your sales department, your client are outside the organization, out there in the market, open market, or your internal function, your incumbent, training function or logistic function or whatever function, marketing function, you still need to work between the departmental, bring down the wall between the departments, and even, successfully manage, uh, you know, contentions, all of that is all about engagement and communication and dialogue.
Right, it is.
And
that builds the foundation for the science of the learning, of the model,
right. Science comes second when it's needed. And I tell you what, I cannot agree with you more. Science and methodologies and models and tools all come after the building the relations and trust.
And that's why people believe that Don Kirkpatrick cared about them,
You
because of
bet.
his humor. And I think that's what carried the model more than its effectiveness. Because to be honest, it wasn't very effective for the first 60 years because they never got past 90-day surveys. But I think they felt that he cared and he was a genuine human that they could relate to. And I hope they feel somewhat the same way with me, because I do care.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Before we end, I know we're near. I'm going to tell you the unwritten story of
You
where
bet.
the 4 letters came from. Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah.
I don't tell many people this. In World War II, in 1944, there was a 19-year-old private in the Army that washed ashore at D-Day and then went on with his company of men, and were told, 4 days later, there's a bridge crossing a canal, that they are to hold that bridge at all costs. And they had been trained to do it. So this 19-year-old and his buddies, were there. It was dusk, and then it started getting dark, and they could hear the enemy coming from the distance. And they were all scared to death, and they said, "Oh my goodness, what's going to happen?" And all of a sudden, according to this 19-year-old, their training kicked in. And they knew what they had to do. They did it. They held the bridge. The reinforcements came. And at that time, he said they were all so emotional that they had survived that. They fell down on their hands and knees, weeping with joy and emotion and relief. And at that moment, that 19-year-old PFC, Private First Class in the U.S. Army, said, in his mind, if there's anything I can ever do, any opportunity that ever comes my way that I can pay back those people that trained me, he said, I will do it. And 10 years later, he got his chance. And that was Don Kirkpatrick. And that was when the spirit and the desire for helping the training industry actually came into existence 10 years before his PhD dissertation. So that's the rest of the story.
Wow, that's a great story. Thank you. That's really something. Never heard about it. Never ever. Thank you, sir, for telling me that. On behalf of all the viewers, I thank you telling us all the stories. So he was he served in the army, and he served in Europe. He survived the Obama Beach, the D-Day, and then he went down and hold on to the bridge and training, all the military training. As a matter of fact, when I talk about when I taught the origin of ICE instructional design and training, I always started from World War II, because of Pearl Harbor, and then United States, and justice and righteousness versus evil, and then we went to Europe, and then the Pacific theaters, and and all of that. And then the training. I always remind my students, training in Chinese is not training in in English. Just a little bit different in translation. Sure. In training, meaning like military training, but training in Chinese in peaceful time right now, peaceful time, and also especially within for-profit organizations, in China, most of them are companies, enterprises. They call it fostering and training.
Oh, good. Okay.
Fostering and training is 培训. 培 means fostering. Really? Fostering. Yeah. 训 meaning train. So fostering and training. So it's combined. In Chinese language is a double, like the very rich in meaning. If just training itself doesn't really carry the human part of it, the human part of it, fostering it, just as you said earlier on, like the little children, and then bring them up and you show them. But in Chinese, the same. You grow with the organization. So they foster you, and then they train you and equip you with the necessary knowledge, skills, and something like that. Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that. I really like
In
that.
Chinese, yeah, patient. In Chinese, training is patient. But I always remind my students saying the original meaning of patient in Chinese is training, is the other half. But if you go back to the military side, and then you will see how important it is, because it is going to save your life. But in the peaceful time, it's going to save your company, your organization from the key competitions, from the competitors. You're winning on the market, but in the wartime, you're winning on the battlefield. That's a little.
And I feel
different.
the same way. There's a battlefield now out there, and this new world approach is not going to save anybody's life, but it could save their career.
You bet. It is.
There's high stakes coming our way, and we just
yeah, the stakes are very high. We also sense that on the other half. I mean, I guess it's a global phenomenon that the training function, the value of training function, is being questioned for many, many years, and even the learning and development professionals themselves have the same perplexation. I should use the word perplexation. Is something probably the right word. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, their ambiguity. I mean, they're ambiguous and they lost directions. But that really leads to our last formal question. That is, do you have any recommendations or suggestions for the, developing country or China, learning development professionals, how they can grow faster?
Well, one last thing. I remember when I was there 8-9 years ago, I got a lot of pushback to what I was teaching, in that I got a lot of questions, but tell us exactly what we need to do. Tell us exactly what we need to do. And it was hard for me to convince them that a lot of the level 3 stuff, I can't tell you exactly what to do because I don't know the situation. The best is to get as much information as you can, both quantitative and qualitative, and then make decisions according to that, to the circumstances, rather than there's a series of things that you are going to do regardless. Now, I trust and I suspect things have changed since then, but that's one thing, is to follow the data, especially level 3 performance data, the drivers of the data, the leading indicators, and to make adjustments. Now, I'm not saying that, I hope no one thinks that I'm suggesting you do what you and I are talking about for every single program that they have.
You bet.
These are for the mission critical programs, the ones that are most likely to drive the strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, that what you said, that they still do. I mean, nowadays, 8 or 9 years later, they still do. They still they tell me what to do. Tell me right away what tools, and then I'll just fast and easy and quick and easy, and just that in English term, like the 50 minutes of fame. I just want that. I just want it easy and quick, and then I'll be Einstein tomorrow, something like that. And still do, especially in the developing countries, and the economic development so fast and faster. I mean, I don't believe is the practitioner from within themselves, but they're forced to do so because the overall environment is changing so fast and so unpredictable. That's why the word VUCA is so popular in China. And ever since Elaine came over, introduced in 1916, she came over and delivered a keynote speech at one of the training magazine conferences in Shenzhen. And she introduced the VUCA, and everybody was jumped on it. And now VUCA is almost a pretense or something like that. Oh, because of WUCA, and now I cannot do this. I cannot achieve my sales because of WUCA. I think that's the overall challenges they're facing. And now, of course, the COVID-19 or all that, and just add
Yeah.
up. So they're really facing a lot of I think that's on one side they're crying for it, they're really desperate in need of, and on the other side they do also need something systematical and sustainable, down the road, like
Right.
what you have been working on. So one of the things that we as practitioners respect really a lot is that you and Dong and spent decades, I mean literally decades, on one model, on one thing, and keep developing it, and keep spreading the word and something like that. So anything, it is always our interest, how do your new world model works, and so we're also expecting your future works or something like that. So it's always on this side. And just for our viewers, can you tell us, if we want to get more information, how do we get more information from you? I mean, we want to hear from you constantly. I don't mind if you send me something, because we do want to keep in touch. So
Well, we have a website, believe it or not. It's kirkpatrickpartners.com, and that's simply at kirkpatrickpartners.com, and it's very easy to register. If you do, we have over 100 free resources, the webinars and white papers and tools and methods and sample surveys, things like that. And under resources, the resources tab has all those things. And we encourage you to use those. Ones that I particularly recommend are, we did a series of 1-hour webinars with Training Magazine Network that are about the fatal flaws of evaluation, the 5 things you should know, how to ask the second question, George, that we were talking about before. Those 1-hour webinars are really packed full of our best stuff, but there's a variety of things. Email is there, always willing to respond to any questions. I mean, we're real people and we like to interact as much as anybody else. So that would be, my suggestion is the kirkpatrickpartners.com website.
You bet. Thank you for providing us that. The second to the last question. I'm sorry to have so many questions, but very small question. What is the ballpark figure that your best guesstimate, or probably you have done it or have not done it, have been the number of learning development professionals worldwide over the decades have been impacted by the Kirkpatrick model? At least they have used it once at their workplace. Do you have a ballpark number on that, or just give us a guesstimate?
I'd say over 100
million.
No, I'm kidding.
100 million?
Not that many. I know we have thousands, 30,000 people that have been certified, or maybe my number is wrong, but as far as influencing, it's got to be millions of workers. Those that even somebody has taken something and connected in a different way and influenced people's lives. I know it's been a lot, and I guess my dad, I'll give him the legacy on that.
You bet. You bet. Probably later on, Jim, we're probably toward the end of the 50, Training TMS 50 series. I'm thinking about it. I'm just chewing on the idea right now. Probably come up with a special session that paying tribute to people that are no longer with us, and your dad probably on top of the list. If we do that, we'll come and bug you, all right? Or you need help.
What else you might do is I can guarantee you would have a very lively Zoom session if you had Brinkerhoff and Kirkpatrick and Pike and Beek. I don't know if you could do it and see how we all interact with each other. I think the human factor would be really interesting with that, interacting with you.
You bet, you bet. As a matter of fact, Jack and Rob, they are on my list, and I'm going to interview them next couple of weeks, and then I'll say hi for you. I know you guys
Do
are
that.
connected, but I'll just.
They're both good friends. You know,
You bet, you bet, you bet.
we may have some approach differences, but we're all good friends, and we if there's anything we can all do collectively that would help multiply the effort, I think we'd all be on it.
You know, Ball Pike for sure. All those big names, and you guys, I should bring all of you together. I will do that because they're all very, very good people. Last question: when are you going to come to China again?
No plans. I have no plans, but I don't know.
Well, I think that's.
Probably be a tourist. You know,
I know.
I have a lot of friends that live around here. They go, you know, it's 10-day sponsored tour. They go to different things. They love it. So maybe that might be it. But maybe I could do a little talk while I'm there. But
because I know that you have partner in China, On Demand. They're your partner in China, and you guys have been working very well. And my last question was really a hope instead of a question. It's just a wish. So we welcome you to China anytime. You know, when the pandemic is over, and so.
Well, I hope that does happen.
You bet.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. I've surely enjoyed it, and enjoy you, George. You're a great guy.
Thank you, sir. And we'll overrun a little bit, 30 minutes, but really great session. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, bye, and bye to everybody. Thank you.
Bye, Jim. That brings to the end of my conversation with Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick. Jim is really a great guy. I can take a big breath right now because, to be honest with you, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. Probably you are as well. During the past hour, Jim told us a lot of untold stories or unwritten stories ever before about his father, Dr. Donald Kirkpatrick, the inventor of the Kirkpatrick training evaluation model, the 4 levels. We all said that we stood on the shoulder of the giants all the time, and this is one of them. Dr. Donald Kirkpatrick was truly a giant in this industry. He started to lay foundation of the evaluation model back in the 1950s. He published it in 1959, but he started in 1954. And even that, 10 years before that, he made that decision. He determined to do so during that war, the World War II, in 1944, as a US Army first class private, the PFC. And since then, the legacy went on to today. And I'm sure it will go on for many years to come. Thank you, Dr. Donald Kirkpatrick. Our hats off to you. Next week, we're gonna have Dr. Roger Addison, another guru and truly expert in this field, in the field of performance improvement. He has been in this field for many decades. You'll find out how many years he has been in this business. And he is truly one of the witnesses of the performance improvement development since its foundation. And he is also the inventor of RSVP principles, if you know what that is. So I will see you next Wednesday, and good night.